The first thing Kathrin noticed about this village was that the snow here didn't just fall. It drifted, like it was thinking. Outside the car window, flakes swirled in slow, deliberate spirals, catching the glow from scattered streetlights and the occasional window still dressed in early Christmas lights. The sky above was a heavy, low ceiling of gray, pressing down over the valley. And beyond it all, rising darker than the sky itself, was the mountain. Shadow Mountain. Her mother had never called it that. In the few stories she'd told about growing up here, she'd used the old name in the old dialect, a word that didn't translate cleanly, a word that tasted like stone and winter and something half forgotten. Shadow Mountain was what everybody else called it. Easier, safer. "Kathrin," her father said quietly from the driver's seat. "We're almost there." She tore her eyes away from the mountain and looked ahead. The road narrowed as they left the main part of the village behind. Trading storefronts and clustered houses for darker stretches of pine forest and the occasional lonely mailbox. Snow piled thick on branches, bending them low like they were bowing toward the road. "Almost where?" she asked. Her voice sounded smaller inside the car than it did in her head. Her father's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd been doing that a lot, she'd noticed, since the funeral. Since the boxes. Since this whole plan. "To the house," he said. "Our house now." "Our house." The words were too big, like a coat that didn't fit. She shifted in her seat, fingers smoothing the crease of her black jeans just to have something to do with her hands. The heater hummed, blowing warm air against her knees. She tugged her scarf higher around her neck even though she wasn't cold. "You don't have to pretend," she said, "that we're excited." He glanced at her just briefly, then back to the road. The snow thickened, a curtain of flakes racing toward the headlights. "I'm not pretending," he said. "I'm trying." He always said it like that, as if trying was a fragile thing that might shatter if he spoke too loudly. Kathrin turned back to the window. Trees slid past, black trunks and white branches and flashes of the mountain between them. Somewhere up there, the peak disappeared into clouds, but she could still sense its shape, an enormous presence against the sky. This was where her mother had grown up, where she'd run through snow as a girl, where she'd gone to school, where she'd left and never wanted to return. And yet this was where she'd sent them. In the weeks after the hospital and the quiet funeral in the city, the paperwork had started arriving. A will. A letter from a lawyer in a village she'd never heard of, bearing the mountain's name in small, precise letters at the top of the page. Her mother had left them the house. Not the flat in the city. Not the savings account that turned out to be thinner than anyone expected. A house in a village Kathrin had never visited. At the foot of a mountain she only knew from half-told stories and the way her mother's voice had always changed when she spoke of home. The car rounded a bend. The forest fell away on one side, opening up to a steep drop. The valley floor lay below like a dark bowl, and there in the hollow, the village spread in a scatter of lights. Tiny houses with pitched roofs, a church steeple, a few shops along a main street. Their signs barely visible through the swirling snow. Farther back, the land rose again, sloping up toward the mountain's base. And there, half hidden by trees, set apart from the closest neighbor, was a house. 2 stories, dark roof, windows like tired eyes. Her father slowed the car as they left the main road. Tires crunched on packed snow. "That's it," he said softly. "There." Kathrin stared. The house looked older than she'd expected. Not ruined or abandoned exactly, but there was a loneliness to it. The paint on the wood siding had faded from red to a tired brownish rose. Snow lay heavy on the roof, and ice fringed the gutters in sharp, glittering teeth. A stone chimney rose crookedly on one side, smoke just beginning to curl from it. At least the man from the village her father had paid to get things ready had remembered to light a fire. A low fence ran around a small yard. The gate sagged open, leaning like it had given up trying. "It's big," she managed. Her father gave a short laugh, though it didn't sound amused. "Bigger than the flat," he said. "And we don't have to pay rent." There it was. The practical reason. The numbers that hadn't added up. The stack of envelopes on the kitchen table in the old place. All with sharp windows revealing even sharper amounts. Kathrin swallowed. She should have felt grateful, she knew. A house to live in. A way out of bills they couldn't pay. A fresh start, people like to call it. It didn't feel fresh. It felt like stepping into something that had been waiting too long. Her father pulled up in front of the gate and put the car in park. For a moment, neither of them moved. The engine ticked softly. Snow tapped against the windshield. "You ready?" he asked. No, she thought. "Yeah," she said instead. They climbed out of the car. The cold slapped her cheeks, sharp and clean and so different from the damp city chill. Her boots sank into the snow with a soft crunch. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and beneath that, something else. Old stone, frost, a faint metallic tang she couldn't place. She pulled her coat tighter and lifted her hood. Her father walked around to the trunk and opened it, breath puffing in clouds. "We'll just take the overnight bags in now," he said. "The mover will bring the rest tomorrow." Tomorrow their whole life would be here in this yard, in this house with its tired eyes. Kathrin stepped through the crooked gate. It creaked, protesting, and swung wider than she pushed it. The path to the front door was buried under several centimeters of snow, but she could see the outline of stones beneath. Someone had swept it earlier, but the sky had been busy since then. She trudged forward, breath loud in her ears. The house loomed as she approached. Up close, she could see details the distance had hidden. The pattern carved into the wooden frame around the door. Tiny leaves, twisting vines, a line of runes she didn't know how to read. The wood was worn smooth at the handle, as if many hands had turned it over many, many years. A faint shiver ran down her spine. Her father joined her, duffel bag over one shoulder. He fumbled in his coat pocket and pulled out a heavy key, old-fashioned and black. The lawyer had handed it to him in an envelope, along with a sheaf of papers and a politely curious look. "You're sure you want to move up there?" he'd asked. "Most people are moving away. We'll manage," her father had said then. Now he slid the key into the lock. It resisted at first, stiff with disuse, then turned with a reluctant clunk. Kathrin held her breath without meaning to. The door opened with a low, slow groan. Warmth wafted out. The smell of burning wood, dry and comforting. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, old wooden floorboards worn to a soft shine, wallpaper patterned with faded flowers. On the left, a doorway opened into what looked like a living room. On the right, another into a kitchen. "It's nicer than I expected," her father said, sounding almost surprised. She stepped inside. The floor creaked under her boots. The house had that old house sound, not empty. Exactly, but full of small noises, settling, breathing, remembering. Kathrin pushed the thought away and walked into the living room. A low sofa and 2 armchairs sat around a wooden coffee table. An old rug with a geometric pattern covered part of the floor. On the far wall, a stone fireplace crackled, filling the room with warmth and flickering light. Above the mantel hung a painting of the mountain, dark against a star-filled sky. Its peak glowed faintly with a ring of pale light, like a halo made of ice. Shadow Mountain watched her from the canvas. She looked away. Her father set the duffel bag down by the sofa. "Well," he said, "home sweet home, I guess." The words echoed strangely in the room. Kathrin walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the yard lay still and white. Beyond the fence, the slope dropped toward the village. Lights glimmered there, warm, distant stars, while the mountain rose behind everything, a wall of shadow swallowing the horizon. Someone was walking along the road below, a figure in a dark coat, hood up, head bent against the wind. As she watched, they paused and turned slightly toward the house, as if sensing her gaze. For a moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink. She couldn't see the face under the hood, but she had the strangest feeling that whoever it was knew exactly which window she stood behind. Then the figure moved on, steps crunching through the snow, and disappeared behind the trees. "Kathrin?" her father called from the hallway. "Want to choose your room before we bring the rest in tomorrow?" She let the curtain fall back into place. "Yeah," she said. "Coming?" The house felt different at night. Kathrin had only been inside for a few hours, but already she sensed that it carried layers, like thin sheets of silence, stacked on top of each other. The kind of silence that didn't just happen, the kind that settled, the kind that waited. After dinner, her father busied himself in the living room, unpacking a few things from his bag and adjusting the logs in the fireplace. Kathrin drifted back toward the staircase almost without thinking, drawn by something she couldn't name. The creak she'd heard earlier still echoed in her memory, a single footstep above her room. She told herself it could have been anything. A pipe, wood shifting, an echo from outside, but the sound had been too deliberate. Slowly she climbed the stairs again. Each step gave a soft complaint under her feet, The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by a weak bulb above. The shadows between the door frames looked thicker now, softened only by the faint glow drifting up from the fireplace downstairs. Her room was on the right, her father's room across from it, but the sound earlier had come from above, somewhere past the ceiling of her room. That meant one thing: the attic. Her mother had never mentioned an attic. Then again, her mother had never mentioned much at all. Kathrin walked to the end of the hall where a narrow pull cord dangled from a square panel in the ceiling. She hesitated, the air around her suddenly colder. Barely a draft, more like a presence withdrawing, making space. She reached up and tugged. With a wooden groan, the attic door swung down. A ladder folded out, old metal joints clicking softly as it extended. Cold air spilled from the darkness above, brushing her cheeks like fingers dipped in winter. "Kathrin?" her father called from downstairs. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," she said quickly, not taking her eyes off the ladder. "Just looking around." "Don't go up there alone. The man said it hasn't been checked for years." She hesitated. Okay. But curiosity nudged her forward. She climbed the first rung. The ladder trembled faintly under her weight, as if the attic were holding its breath. The darkness above felt thick but not empty. One more step, just one. Enough to peek inside. Her hand brushed something metal near the top rung. She looked down. A key. Old iron, slightly curved at the tip. It lay on the edge of the ladder hinge, as if placed there intentionally. Not fallen, not forgotten. Placed. She closed her fingers around it. It was cold enough to bite. Before she could look closer, a sudden thud echoed from inside the attic. "Sharp! Quick!" Like a box shifting, or a footstep. Kathrin froze. "Kathrin?" Her father called again. Closer this time. "Are you sure you're okay?" She shoved the key into her pocket. "Yeah," she said, backing down the ladder. "I'm fine." The attic exhaled cold air as she pushed the ladder back up. When the ceiling closed again, silence settled like a blanket, but the key pressed cold and insistent against her thigh. Her father didn't ask more. Maybe he sensed she didn't want to explain. Maybe he was too tired to press. They finished tidying, then he said goodnight and went upstairs. Kathrin lingered near the bottom of the staircase, feeling the weight of the house around her. It wasn't threatening, but it was aware, listening. When she finally went to her room, she placed the attic key on her desk. Its shadow stretched long across the wood, distorted by the slant of her lamp. Old iron hand-forged. It didn't match any door she'd seen yet. Who left it there? Why? And why tonight? Her first night in the house? She pushed the key gently with her fingertip. It gave off a faint vibration, as if resonating with something deeper in the walls. A tremor ran through her stomach. She had the strangest feeling that this key wasn't just forgotten. It was meant for her. Kathrin changed into warm clothes and pulled on a jacket, suddenly restless. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had shifted closer after sunset. She needed air. She grabbed her boots and slipped quietly downstairs, careful not to wake her father. The front door protested with a soft groan when she opened it, but the night hushed the sound quickly. Outside, snowflakes floated lazily in the still air. The world felt suspended, silent, untouched. The cold bit her cheeks, sharp but refreshing. She walked toward the fence, her boots crunching softly. The sky above the village glowed faintly from scattered lights below, but the mountain loomed darker than everything around it. A thin trail of smoke rose from their chimney, curling in soft ribbons toward the sky. Kathrin let out a long breath. The air here tasted different, cleaner, older. She followed the fence line, glancing toward the trees behind the house. In daylight, they had seemed ordinary, just forest. But at night, they felt deeper, like a boundary between one world and another. The shadows between the trunks looked alive. She squinted. Was that light again? A faint shimmer moved between the trees, pale and rhythmic, like the flicker of a candle flame carried by someone walking. Her breath hitched. Maybe it was someone from the village. Maybe the road curved closer to the woods than she realized. Maybe. A crack of snow behind her. She spun. Someone stood by the fence. A boy, her age, maybe a little older, wearing a dark coat dusted with snow. His hood was down, revealing warm brown hair flattened by weather and cheeks flushed from the cold. His breath clouded in the air, but his eyes, dark, observant, did not leave hers. He raised a hand slightly, palm outward. Not threatening, more like apology. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. His voice was low, steady. shaped by the quiet of winter. Kathrin blinked. "I didn't hear you." "That's good," he said with a half-smile. "Means you're not from around here." She frowned. "Why would that matter?" He hesitated, eyes drifting up toward the mountain behind the house. "People from here walk differently," he said. "We know where not to step." She didn't know what to say to that. He stepped closer to the fence, careful, like he didn't want to startle her. "You just moved in," he said. "How did you—" He nodded at the chimney. New smoke. "And the lights were off earlier. This place has been empty since, well, a long time. You know the house?" He looked at it for a moment before answering. "I know of it." A small gust of wind pushed snow between them. Kathrin pulled her coat tighter. "I'm Kathrin," she offered. "I know," he said quietly. Her stomach tightened. "How?" His eyes met hers again, steady but not unkind. "Because everyone knows your family." She swallowed. "My mother's family?" He nodded. Something unspoken flickered between them. Recognition, maybe, or the shape of something that would matter later. "I'm Mikkel," he said finally. The name fit him somehow. Soft but grounded. Winter boy. Mountain boy. Kathrin opened her mouth to say something else. But a sound cut through the trees before she could. A sharp crack, not a branch. Something heavier. Both of them turned toward the woods. The faint light Kathrin had seen earlier flickered again. Once. Twice. Then vanished deeper, among the trunks. Mikkel's jaw tightened. "You saw that, didn't you?" Kathrin nodded slowly. "What is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to the fence until only an arm's length separated them. "Listen," he said softly. "If you see lights in the woods, don't follow them. And if you hear anything at all, after midnight, stay inside." Her pulse thumped in her ears. "Why?" "Because Shadow Mountain wakes differently than the rest of the valley." A shiver crawled up her arms despite the layers she wore. Mikkel looked at her like he wanted to say more, but something held him back. He took a single step away from the fence. "Be careful tonight, Kathrin." Then he turned and walked toward the road, boots crunching softly in the snow. She watched him disappear past the curve, swallowed by the dim glow of the village lights. The woods behind her whispered. Or maybe it was the wind. Kathrin backed toward the house, unable to shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her from between the trees. When she finally reached the porch and gripped the door handle, a low, almost inaudible sound drifted through the air. A chime. Soft, metallic, like a key striking stone. She froze. The key in her pocket, it pulsed with warmth. Not imagination, not leftover heat. Warm, alive. Kathrin stumbled into the house and shut the door quickly, pressing her back against the wood. Her breath came fast, fogging in front of her. Upstairs, the attic door creaked, slow, long, as if answering something, and the house, which had felt merely old before, now felt awake, listening, waiting. The attic door stopped creaking, but the silence that followed felt wrong. Too deliberate, too aware. Kathrin stood frozen in the hallway, her back pressed against the inside of the front door. The house around her seemed to settle into a deeper stillness, as if waiting to see what she would do next. She swallowed hard. Maybe her father had heard it. Maybe he'd come downstairs now, rubbing sleep from his eyes, telling her she was imagining things. Telling her that houses made noises, old wood shifted, drafts played tricks, but the sound upstairs had been nothing like shifting wood. It had sounded like acknowledgement. Kathrin forced herself to move. Slowly, she slipped out of her boots and hung her coat on the hook by the door. Her hands shook. She tried to steady them by pressing her palms against her thighs. She didn't want to go upstairs. Every part of her resisted the idea, but staying down here alone felt worse, like turning her back on something that was already watching. The stair creaked under her foot as she climbed. The air felt colder with each step, thin and sharp like the breath before a scream. The faint glow from her bedroom spilled into the hallway when she reached the top. Nothing looked different, but everything felt different. Kathrin paused outside her room, listening. Her father's door was closed. A dim line of light glowed beneath it. He must still be awake, reading or organizing things for tomorrow. She didn't want to worry him. She didn't want him to think she was struggling her first night here. Even if she was. She stepped into her room and closed the door softly behind her. The candle on her bedside table was exactly where she'd left it, The key lay on her desk, cold metal catching the lamplight. Her coat hung on the chair, damp from snow. Everything was normal, ordinary, except for her heartbeat, drumming like a frantic fist against her ribs. She paced once, twice, trying to shake the lingering sense that something had followed her inside. That something stood just beyond the edge of her awareness. Her gaze drifted to the key again. She approached it slowly. When she picked it up, the cold shocked her fingers. But as soon as her skin wrapped around it, the metal shifted, warming not from her touch, but from within, as if something inside the key had woken. A pulse. Soft, rhythmic. Kathrin dropped it. The key hit the wooden floor with a sound that echoed too loudly for its size. She backed up until her legs hit the bed, then sank onto the edge. "What is happening?" she whispered. She buried her face in her hands and breathed deeply. One night here. Just one. Already the house had more questions than answers. Her mother had lived in this home once, had grown up in these rooms, walked these halls, slept under this roof. Did she hear footsteps in the attic? Did she feel the walls breathe? Did she ever tell anyone? Or had she left because she knew what lived here? Kathrin rubbed her forehead. She needed something, an anchor, a distraction. Her eyes drifted to the window. The curtains trembled slightly, though she couldn't feel any draft. She approached slowly and pulled the fabric aside. The village below glowed like a constellation made of warm lights scattered across the valley. The darkness surrounding it felt deeper tonight, like the mountain itself pressed closer. Kathrin scanned the tree line behind the house. The woods stood completely still. No flickering light this time. No movement, no whisper of branches. For a moment she let herself breathe. Then she saw him. A silhouette stood near the bend in the road. Tall, motionless, facing the house. Her breath froze. The figure wasn't close. Enough for her to see his face, not really, but something in the posture. The angle of the shoulders. Mikkel? She pressed closer to the glass. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't turn away, just watched. Kathrin blinked, heartbeat quickening. But when she opened her eyes fully, the figure was gone. Vanished. A flicker of cold ran down her spine. Maybe it hadn't been him. Maybe it had been someone else. Maybe... The floor beneath her gave a sudden, sharp creak. She spun. The sound came from her wardrobe. Every part of her told her not to go closer. But she did. Step by slow step. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached for the handle. She pulled the door open. Coats, a pair of boots, an empty storage box. Nothing unusual. But something had been inside. She wasn't imagining it. The air still held the faintest hint of cold, colder than the room itself. She stepped back and closed the wardrobe door. Then, faint as a whisper, "Kathrin." She froze. The voice was barely a breath, soundless and impossible. More like thought than voice. Like someone whispering from inside the walls. "No," she whispered. "No, no." The house groaned. Long, slow, like something old shifting its weight. Kathrin backed toward the bed again, legs unsteady. Her hand brushed the quilt, grounding her. She needed to calm down. She needed to think. She sat down, then lay back slowly until her head found the pillow. She pulled the quilt over her shoulders and forced her breath into steady rhythm. She was tired, exhausted, jet-lagged from grief. The house was old. Her nerves were wired from meeting, a boy in the dark and seeing a strange light in the trees. Things made noise at night. Old places held memories, old mountains, even older ones. She exhaled slowly through her nose. She could sleep. She could... A soft click broke the silence. She opened her eyes. The candle on her bedside table had lit itself. A tiny flame danced calmly on the wick, bright and impossibly alive. Kathrin shot upright, heart hammering. The flame didn't flicker from her movement. Didn't shrink, didn't grow. It just glowed, steady, warm, impossibly normal in the otherwise dark room. She approached it cautiously. "Stop," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was talking to. The flame leaned subtly toward her, as if acknowledging her voice. Her fingers trembled. She reached out. A knock echoed through the house. Not at her bedroom door. The front door. One single knock. Soft, measured, like someone testing whether they were welcome. Kathrin's chest tightened. It was almost midnight. No one came to visit at this hour. No one normal. The candle flickered for the first time. The flame stretched tall, then leaned again, toward the hallway this time. "No," Kathrin breathed. "No, please." The knock came again, this time just slightly louder. Her legs carried her to the bedroom door before she even decided to move. She cracked it open. The hallway was dark except for the dim glow spilling from her father's cracked door. He'd left his lamp on, probably reading himself to sleep. She stepped out quietly. When she reached the top of the stairs, she could see the shape of the front door below. Something shifted behind the frosted glass pane. A silhouette, still, waiting. Kathrin's breath hitched. She whispered before she could stop herself. "Mikkel?" The silhouette didn't move. Didn't answer. Didn't go away. The candle in her room extinguished itself. Darkness smothered the upstairs hallway. Kathrin didn't dare breathe. Then, from behind the front door, came a voice. Soft, familiar. "Kathrin, open the door." Her stomach twisted. It was Mikkel's voice, but wrong, too smooth, too deliberate, like someone reciting him from memory. Her hand hovered above the banister, fingers numb. "Please," the voice said again, softer. "Let me in." Her heart pounded wildly. Her throat closed. Because she knew that whatever stood behind that door was not Mikkel. Not even close. The voice said her name a third time, almost tender. And the front door handle turned, all by itself. The front door handle turned a fraction more, metal whispering against metal. Kathrin's fingers dug into the banister. Her whole body went rigid, lungs burning with the breath she refused to let out. The voice came again, soft through the wood. "Kathrin, it's cold out here. Please, open the door." It was Mikkel's tone. The same low, steady cadence. The same way he'd said her name by the fence. But the warmth was gone. This voice was empty. Hollow, like an echo spoken by someone who didn't understand the words. "Stop," she whispered, though her lips barely moved. The handle paused. For a heartbeat, the house held still with her. The walls, the floor, even the wind seemed to hush. Then the handle jerked sharply downward, as if someone or something on the other side had gotten impatient. The latch clicked. The door did not open. Something else had hold of it from this side. Kathrin's heart leaped into her throat. A sound rose from the wood around her, so faint she almost mistook it for her own blood in her ears. A low, steady vibration, like humming in the bones of the house. Not threatening, not cruel, protective. The latch jerked again, harder this time. The whole door shook in its frame. Frost flaked from the edges of the stained glass pane. "Kathrin." The voice had lost all resemblance to Mikkel now. The words stretched too long, vowels warped, consonants blurred. "Kathrin. Let me in." The last vowel smeared into something inhuman, a scraping sound like metal dragged across stone. "No," she breathed, though she wasn't sure if she was refusing it, or refusing herself. The humming in the walls deepened. The banister under her hand grew warmer, pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat. The door handle twisted as far as it could go. Held, strained. Then abruptly it stopped. Silence slammed into the house so suddenly that her ears rang. The handle eased back to its resting position, slowly, like fingers unclenching on the other side. For a long moment nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Then came a soft sound against the wood. Not knocking, not scratching. A drag, like something heavy sliding down the outside of the door. Then a faint, wet tapping as if melted snow were dripping from something that had never been snow at all. Kathrin's skin crawled. "Kathrin?" This time the voice came from behind her. She spun. A strangled cry caught halfway up her throat. Her father stood in the doorway of his room. Hair mussed, face creased from the pillow. His eyes were heavy with sleep and worry. "What are you doing up?" he asked. "It's late." She clung to the banister tighter, forcing air back into her lungs. "I heard something," she managed. "At the door." He rubbed his face, then descended the stairs past her. Each step a reassurance that at least one familiar thing in the world still followed normal, rules of weight and gravity. "What kind of something?" he asked as he reached the ground floor. She didn't want to say, didn't have words that made sense. "A knock," she said finally. "I thought maybe someone from the village." Her father frowned and approached the door. He peered through the frosted glass, then undid the chain and opened it a crack. Cold air rushed in, biting at Kathrin's ankles where her socks left skin exposed. "Hello?" her father called into the night. "Anyone there?" No answer. He opened the door wider. Snow lay smooth and undisturbed across the small front step. save for the shallow, familiar imprints of their own boots from earlier. Beyond the porch, the yard stretched quiet and white to the sagging fence. The road beyond was empty. No footprints. No shadows. Nobody. Probably just the wind knocking something loose, he said over his shoulder. These old houses. He trailed off as he stepped all the way out and looked down. What? Kathrin asked. He didn't answer immediately. She forced herself to follow him, toes curling against the cold wood of the floorboards until they found the firmness of the threshold. The night air cut like glass along her cheeks as she leaned to look. There were no footprints, but something had touched the door. At knee height, across the lower panel of the wood, a thin, dark streak ran from the edge of the frame down to the step. It was the width of 2 fingers pressed together. In the dim porch light, it was hard to tell what color it was exactly, but it was too dark to be meltwater, too thick to be just dirt. Her father scowled, wiping at it with the edge of his sleeve. The mark smeared but did not vanish completely. Probably rusty water from the old hinges, he said, though his tone sounded more like he was trying the words out than believing them. I'll check it properly tomorrow when it's light. He closed the door more firmly than before and slid the chain back into place, metal clicking with satisfying finality. What time is it? He asked, glancing at the old clock on the wall. Almost midnight, Kathrin said. He sighed. The lines around his mouth deepened. We both need sleep, he said gently. It's been a long day, moving, new place. It's normal to hear things in a house like this and think they're more than they are. More than they are. A voice that wasn't a voice. A key that warmed in her hand. A candle that lit on its own. A door that refused to open to something wearing a boy's tone like a mask. Yeah, she said faintly. Normal. He reached out and squeezed her shoulder, his grip warm and real. If you need anything, he said, just knock on my door. Don't stay awake alone and scare yourself, okay? I'm fine, she lied. I'll go back to bed. He searched her face for a second longer, then nodded. Good night, Kathrin. Good night. She watched him climb the stairs, his shadow dragging long along the wall behind him. Only when his door clicked shut did she realize she was still standing, barefoot in the cold spot where the draft from outside had bitten into the floor. Slowly she backed away from the door. The humming in the walls had faded now, gone back to the almost inaudible thrum she'd heard when they'd first arrived, as if the house was settling again, as if whatever it had done to hold the door shut had cost it something. Thank you, she whispered before she could stop herself. The nearest floorboard creaked softly in reply, just once. She shivered and hurried upstairs. In her room, the candle remained unlit, the wick dark once more. The key still lay where she'd dropped it earlier, a small, harmless shape against the floorboards. Harmless. She picked it up carefully. It was cool to the touch now, nothing more. It didn't pulse. Didn't hum, just sat heavy in her palm, ordinary and impossible at once. What are you? She murmured. No answer came, of course. She set the key back on the desk, this time farther from the edge, as if that small gesture could keep it from rolling back into the story that seemed intent on unfolding around her. Her bed welcomed her with the lingering warmth of her earlier nervous movements. She slid under the quilt and pulled it up to her chin. For a long time, she lay on her side, facing the door, watching the strip of dim hallway light beneath it. Nothing moved. No shadows passed. No voice called her name. Gradually, the tight fist in her chest loosened. Her breaths grew deeper, slower. Bits of the day drifted through her mind in disjointed pieces. The car and the snow. The first sight of the house. The painting of the mountain. The light in the woods. Mikkel by the fence, cheeks flushed from cold. His warning about walking differently. The thing at the door wearing his voice. Her eyelids grew heavy. At some point, without quite meaning to, she fell asleep. She was running. Snow crunched under her boots. But when she glanced down, they weren't her boots. They were smaller. Scuffed leather. The hem of a wool dress brushed her calves. The air burned in her lungs, freezing and bright. Laughter echoed ahead. High, breathless, familiar, but not. The silhouette of another girl flashed between the trees. Braids flying, scarf trailing. Come on! The girl shouted, voice carried on a wind that wasn't a wind at all. We'll be late. Kathrin tried to call back, but no sound left her throat. The forest around them was thicker than the one behind the house had been earlier. Trunks impossibly close together, branches overhead interwoven like fingers clasped in prayer. Strange symbols had been carved into some of the trees, their grooves filled with frost-glittering ice. The girl ahead of her burst out into a clearing. Kathrin followed, lungs aching. They stood at the foot of the mountain, closer than Kathrin had ever seen it. From here, Shadow Mountain wasn't just a shape on the horizon. It was a wall of stone towering into the sky, riddled with cracks and striations like old scars. The air near its surface hummed, a low vibration that made her teeth ache. The other girl turned. Her face was blurred, but something in the tilt of her head, the shape of her jaw, rang through Kathrin like a struck bell. Mother. The words surfaced in her mind without permission. The girl reached for her hand. When their fingers touched, every sound dropped away. The hum of the mountain, the wind, the distant calls from the village far below. Just silence. Then a voice, not hers, not the girl's, not belonging to any throat, whispered from the stone itself. Kathrin. The mountain knew her name. She jerked awake, heart slamming against her ribs. Her room swam into focus. The window a dark rectangle. The faint outline of the wardrobe, the curve of the desk, the candle on the bedside table, the quilt bunched in her fists. Her skin was damp with cold sweat. Her breathing came too fast. It was still night. The light outside was the deep blue before dawn, a color that belonged to the hours, when the world decided whether to keep dreaming or wake. She listened. No footsteps, no knocks, but faintly. From somewhere above the ceiling, a long, slow creak curved through the air. Not like before, no single sharp footstep. More like someone shifting their weight. She stared up at the dark, the attic. Her first impulse was to bury herself under the covers and pretend she hadn't heard. To wait for morning and the thin safety of daylight. But something in her chest refused. The dream had felt too real. The girl's blurred face, the mountain's voice, the way her name had vibrated from stone. Questions pushed against her exhaustion. About her mother, about the house, about why the mountain seemed to know who she was. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat up. The floor felt cold through her socks, but this time the chill grounded her instead of frightening her. The candle on the bedside table remained unlit. She reached for the lamp instead and turned it on. Warm light filled the room, chasing shadows into corners. The key on the desk caught the glow, its outline sharp and stubborn. If the house wanted her to go up there, it was doing a very good job of nudging her. "I'm not going to the attic in the middle of the night," she told the room quietly. "I'm not stupid." Silence answered. Then the radiator gave a soft clank, as if shrugging. She checked the clock on her phone. 5:37 a.m. Too early for her father to be up. Too late to pretend it was still the middle of the night. Kathrin sighed and pushed herself to her feet. "Fine," she whispered to no one. "Then I'll wait." She dressed automatically. Warm jeans, thick sweater, socks that reached almost to her knees. She braided her hair to keep it out of her face. Her movements felt both detached and careful, like she was playing the role of a girl who had slept well and wasn't thinking about voices, in wood or mountains in dreams. By the time she opened her door, the sky outside the hallway window had lightened a shade, sliding from ink to deep steel blue. Snow still fell, but gently now, each flake turning slow somersaults toward the ground. Her father's door remained closed. She padded downstairs, the steps less ominous in the growing light. In the kitchen, she turned on the small overhead lamp, its yellow glow settling over the room like a soft blanket. The familiarity of coffee helped. The kettle, the measured scoop of grounds, the way the smell unfurled the moment hot water hit them. This, at least, followed rules she understood. She was pouring water into 2 mugs when she heard his door open upstairs. A moment later, footsteps thumped softly down the stairs. "Morning," her father said, voice rough with sleep but already trying for cheerfulness. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," she said. "First night. In a new place will do that." He reached for the mug she pushed toward him, wrapping his hands around the heat. "Thanks. You're a lifesaver." They sat at the small table by the window. Outside, the world slowly shifted from shadow to outline to shape. The village lights dimmed as the sky took over their work. "How did you sleep?" he asked. She thought of the voice at the door, the dream at the mountain's foot, the way the house had held the door shut. "Strange," she said honestly. "But I'm okay." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Today we go into the village," he said. "Find the store, maybe the cafe, see what we're dealing with. And Astrid," she said before she could swallow the name. He blinked. "The woman from the cafe? Knut mentioned her, yeah." He tilted his head. "Did your mother ever talk about her?" "Once," Kathrin said slowly. in an old photo. "You should bring it next time," he said. "Might be good to have some kind of connection, even if it's a small one." Connection. The word sat oddly in her chest, tangled up with the memory of the dream girl's hand in hers. Her mother had left this place and never wanted to come back. And yet she'd sent Kathrin here. Why? Her gaze slid to the wall beyond her father's shoulder, where the hallway framed the bottom few steps of the staircase. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something there. A faint outline, a suggestion of a figure sitting halfway up, watching them. She blinked. It was only shadow, the way the banister and the light from the kitchen aligned. Her father finished his coffee. "I'll see if I can find the snow shovel and clear the path properly," he said, standing. "We'll head into the village in an hour, okay?" "Okay." He squeezed her shoulder again as he passed. When he was gone, the kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock. Kathrin turned her mug between her hands, letting the heat sink into her palms. She thought of Mikkel's real voice by the fence, of the warning in his eyes when he told her not to follow lights in the woods, of the other voice outside the door, trying his shape on like a borrowed coat. She thought of the dream on the mountain, of the wordless recognition when she'd looked at the blurred face of the girl and known, instinctively, that she belonged to her. Something bound all of these things together. This house, the mountain, the boy in the snow, the woman her mother had been before she became just stories and silence. Kathrin set her mug down. "Fine," she murmured to the kitchen, to the house, to herself. "We'll start with answers in the daylight." She glanced up the stairs, toward the ceiling where the attic waited, patient and dark. "And then," she added under her breath, "we'll see what you've been keeping." Outside, the first pale edge of the sun pushed up behind Shadow Mountain, outlining its jagged crest in a thin band of light. For a brief, breathless moment, it almost looked like the mountain was crowned with fire, watching, waiting, knowing her name,